And please make sure that if you have questions, you put them in the chat as we go along. We'll address them at the end of the webinar. For those of you who didn't already sign up in the Google form, we will post it in the chat as well. I'm happy to be here today with you. My name is George Edwards. I'm the Chief Accreditation Officer at the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. The host for today's roundtable is Dr. Christoph Ott. Christoph is a member of the board at the Lausanne American School in Switzerland, and he's also the director of the Quality Schools Certificate, which is a Swiss-based quality certification program for schools. He has extensive enrollment management experience in international markets and guiding organizations to achieve long-term goals. Forward-thinking and innovative strategic thinker with an ability to build cross-functional teams, develop comprehensive programs, and improve service quality. Christoph has excellent interpersonal skills and is an effective collaborator with both students and adults. He is skilled at introducing new and innovative ideas into secondary education and implementing them through empowerment, motivation, and inspiration. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Christoph to get things started. Christoph?
Thank you very, very much, George. Can you hear me all right? Is the sound audio okay? Okay. So thank you, George. My co-host today is George Edwards, and he is, as you just mentioned, the Chief Accreditation Officer of NEASC, the New England Associations of Schools and Colleges, where he assists schools through New England and throughout the world in the process of continuous improvement by participating in accreditation. George was a public school educator in the USA, serving as a high school principal for over 20 years. George was the founding principal of several schools, including some explicitly designed around the NEASC standards. George lives in Sanape, New Hampshire, and I'm never sure if I pronounced this correctly. I'm sorry about that.
Close enough.
Okay, so before introducing the panelists, let me maybe give you a little bit the inception story of these roundtables. So I presented last year at the NEASC annual conference, and my presentation was titled Strategic Planning in the Times of Crisis, which was a collection of lessons that I had learned by conducting a strategic thinking process throughout COVID at the LAS, Lausanne American School. At the same time, I had been last year interviewing heads of school from around the globe, including some of which are on this call, such as you, Chris. So thanks for joining again out of China. And so basically, I brought all this together, tried to give it some shape and some logic, and basically, George and I hit it off. In a sense, we hit it off because we both realized that schools will either reinvent the wheel, like what we did at LAS when it comes to strategy, or hire outside resources, but they don't seem to share best practices with each other. So this is why we're here today. This is our fifth round table. We are keeping these round tables to about 2 per semester. We're very excited to have you all here. And so today the theme of loose and tight leadership styles in the strategic context is what we'll be able to discuss a little bit more in depth, thanks to our panelists. So let me introduce our first panelist, Howard THIERY. So Howard has been a public school superintendent for the last 14 years and is currently a superintendent in Regional School District 10 in Howington, Burlington, Connecticut. He's been commissioner on the NEASC Commission on International Education for 5 years and is currently the chair of that commission. Howard is an adjunct faculty member in the Educational Leadership Program at the University of Connecticut, where he has taught in the Principal Preparation Program for 11 years. Through his work at UConn, he was also a member of the design team and led instructor in the Advanced Leadership Training Program in Amman, Jordan, which is a cooperation between the University of Connecticut and Queen Rania Teachers Academy and the University of Jordan. Sorry about that. Howard, can you give us a quick wave so people can put a name to the face, please? Okay, so our next panelist is John CLEMENTS. John Clements began his career at Nipmuc Regional 24 years ago as an English teacher and has been administrator at Nipmuc for 19 years and the past 12 as principal. John is a believer in the capacity of students, teachers, and school communities to reimagine school for the modern world. John is a board member and past president of the Blackstone Valley Educational Foundation, where he works to build connections between schools and careers, and he is a proponent of the power of the school accreditation process. He has worked closely with NEASC, including chairing the committee to design the 2020 standards for accreditation for 600 plus schools and serving 6 years as commissioner. He is the recipient of NEASC's 2020 Jacob Ludus III Leadership Award. John is a believer in the power of professional sharing as a resource of growth and development. He is the founder of the Inspired Learning Project, a network of learners and leaders from across New England who share resources, practices, and professional support to enhance opportunities for modern learning in our schools. He also founded and moderated a weekly Twitter chat called Think Tank ED, connecting educators from different school communities throughout social media. He co-created the Launching Modern Learning course in order to guide other educators in building schools that inspire. John is the 2017 Massachusetts Principal of the Year, and he and his wife Elizabeth live in Grafton, Massachusetts with their son Ben, 15, and James, 13. Thank you very much for joining us, John. And I will now jump right into the description and the bio of our last panelist. This is Thomas. So Thomas SCHAEDLER is he's dedicated his entire professional life to a passion for international schools. He has a career spanning over 30 years. He led international schools in Geneva, Switzerland, in Rome, Italy, in Berlin, Germany, Singapore, Zurich, Switzerland, Stuttgart, Germany, and the Bahamas, and has also worked for the World Bank in Indonesia. He holds an MA in education from the University of Zurich and an MBA from the University of Hull, UK, and a master's in educational leadership from Leeds University, Pennsylvania. In his work, he relies on students who demonstrate enthusiasm, sincerity, and commitment. Strong, dedicated, and creative faculty, school heads and boards who are prepared to work under rapidly changing conditions, and solid collaboration with parents who entrust schools with their most valuable asset, their children. Most recently, Thomas has worked as a consultant and coach with leaders and boards of international schools around the world, enjoying the process of challenging both individuals and teams to exceed their dream. A Swiss citizen, he is bilingual in German and English and is fluent in French and Italian. So Thomas, I appreciate you joining us also on this panel today. And to be very, very honest, having had a discussion with each panelist independently and prepared the slides that they sent me, I'm very excited about today because I think we're going to go through some really, really interesting content. And for those of you who have not signed up yet with the resource mailing list that I've created, George has been kind enough to post a Google form on the chat. So if you just click on that link, fill out your information, and I will make sure that I invite you for future roundtables, but also send you the resources for this roundtable afterwards, which includes recordings, slides, and the connection or the email addresses of the panelists. Okay, so I think with that being said, I'd like to basically hand the word over to Howard to let him illuminate the topic that we're focusing on today. Howard, you're on mute. Sorry.
Can't believe I made that mistake after all these years on Zoom. Hi, everybody. Thank you. George, if you want to advance the slides.
Oh, I am sorry. Howard, I apologize. I had prepared one more slide in the middle there before handing the word over to you that I forgot about.
No worries.
As I was preparing for this topic that George and I chose already a while ago, I kind of tried to summarize it in a visual and comparing a little bit to two artists from a similar time period. They actually died the same year, which I didn't realize, which is Piet Mondrian on the left and Wassily Kandinsky on the right, both continental European artists, and obviously their styles are very, very different. Piet Mondrian was very famous because he was the inspiration for the L'Oreal beauty product logo. But their artistic styles actually represent very, very well, in my opinion, in a nutshell, that dichotomy of what is needed, or what is what when it comes to tight versus loose, and where the panelists will help us understand. And now I'll give it back to you, Howard, how to use this, or how to teach this to people around you, and how to apply this within the context. So apologies for that, Howard, and it's all yours.
Okay, one more, George. So when I was asked to do this, and I'm actually doing a presentation at the upcoming NEASC convention or workshop in early December on this same topic. This is a topic I've been working with my leadership teams with across the last 20 years or so. And it's just one of the strategies that we talk about as leaders. And we talk about it because loose-tight coupling is something that is in place in any system, a business system, a school system, a governmental system. It's going to be present to some degree or another. And I like John earlier when we were talking, used the word continuum, and it is a continuum, loose-tight coupling. It's often not one state or the other. And so with my leadership team, often my invested interest is getting my leadership team to be intentional about where they are building loose coupling and where they're building tight coupling, what each does, what each is, and what the benefits and drawbacks of each are, because they have strengths and weaknesses. And so, it's interesting, in the United States, different from some other countries, educational systems have historically been loosely coupled. And individual classrooms, individual schools within a school district, all kind of operated siloed and independently. And there was a lot of independence, autonomy, agency over teaching and learning. We're not a country with a national curriculum. We're not a country with national sort of tests where everybody takes the exam. Well, that's growing more and more that way. I'll talk about that. But historically, we haven't been a country that way. And so loose coupling was a natural state of particularly public education in the United States. But then in the late mid-90s until the early 2000s, the standards movement came in, and it was all about national standards, state standards, sort of fixed programs, fixed pedagogies, very much standardizing instructional practices across all schools, deprivatizing classrooms, de-siloing, and it was very much a movement toward tight coupling. And so typical of pendulum swings in systems, particularly schools, we are now seeing in the 2000 as we head into 2020s, a movement back to, okay, so what did that get you? There's limitations, there's ceilings on what tight coupling can get you. And how do we balance tight coupling in our system with loose coupling to get both standardization of best practices, but also innovation and flexibility and adaptability, because the students in front of us are all highly variable in their needs. And matter of fact, in the district I'm working in, we're defining strategic instruction as that adaptable intersection of student needs and the standard learning goals that we want for every student. And so when we talk about being strategic, we talk about making sure we're hitting the intersection point of where every student is and the learning trajectory we want for all, which is kind of loose tight coupling right in the middle of the continuum. So slide, George. So if you want to think about loose tight coupling, and you can really, this is just a metaphor I used with my team this summer. Think about a game, football. They use soccer here. I apologize to everybody else around the world. We'll say football. Imagine a football match where instead of being the fixed pitch of the field and all the rules, it's played on a round field. There's multiple goals. Anybody can score in any goal at any time. You can just declare that's my goal. The field is tilted on one side to favor, some people, and it's tilted against other people. This is really loose coupling. It's really, it's the rules are a little bit changeable and differential all over the landscape. Next. And so really, this is about systems thinking in the way I work with my admin team, because I want my leadership team to be systems thinkers. And, you know, both a loosely coupled system and tightly coupled system are still a system. It's just about how the elements of the system interact with each other. And so in a loose coupled system, the elements are loosely connected. The actions of the elements have only a minor effect on the other elements. There's a high degree of autonomy, high degree of self-determination. There's a high degree of adaptability. On the extreme end of loose coupling, if you really went extreme, it would be arguable whether there is a system. Of course, in a school, you're sort of bound into a system because you all exist, within the same context of the students and the community. So next. So elements of loose coupling, you have a high degree of freedom, autonomy. You have lower process and outcome predictability. If you went from one classroom to another and you asked, what will I see? It would be a lower chance of there being predictable. Like you might see, it's 9 a.m. in the morning and you might see a math lesson in this classroom that looks this way. In the next classroom, you see a math lesson that looks completely different. And in the third classroom, you see a language arts lesson or a world language lesson. And the one teacher is teaching in a very teacher-centered, direct instruction way. Another teacher is very constructivist. A third teacher is doing exploration or problem-based learning. It's highly adaptive to teacher styles, to teacher needs, highly adaptive to student needs. There's low consistency. However, that also creates a higher degree of isolation. If you have teachers collaborate and try to talk to each other about what's going on in practices, it's more difficult. You have a lower degree of natural interaction and a lower accountability to method, not necessarily outcome, but we're not like holding people accountable for doing the same thing the same way. Next. Other concepts that we often talk about in education, these in a loosely coupled system, classrooms are privatized. We often talk about classrooms being siloed, they're islands. However, maybe on the good side of life, everyone's a scout, a pioneer. You may get lots of innovation. You may get lots of creativity. The system is very decentralized. So when I came to the district I'm in now, and it's why I began talking about this with my leadership team, I came here about 4 years ago and I surveyed the system for about a year. It was right the year before COVID. And I noticed that the district itself had put in place lots of the right, what I think of as the right pedagogical supports, programs, systems, professional development. We had a lot of really good practice churning around the district, both in the way we developed our teachers, the way we supported them, the resources we had, the schedules we had. And so that was very exciting. But when I walked into classrooms, the fidelity to those things, the fidelity to those shared visions and the things that had been rolled out across the district was extremely variable and extremely low. And so although we had centralized a shared vision of high quality teaching and learning, in practice, the system was very loosely coupled and you had pockets of all kinds of different practice. You had teachers hanging on to practice from 25 years ago. You had teachers who were deeply embedded in the latest and greatest things that have been rolled out across the district. And so I began looking at that with my leadership team in terms of how do we get fidelity to what we believe are the best practices for students while still maintaining adaptability and creativity. And it was really about, so we began rolling out this idea of loose tight coupling as a leadership strategy. So go ahead, advance the slide. And because we were where we were in this district, we had to talk about tight coupling because I'd come from a district where for 15, 16 years, we had already traveled this journey and we were very much moving toward more loose coupling because we had consistent best practices and we were looking to advance innovation, creativity, and adaptability. But in my new school system, the context was that because we didn't have fidelity to best practices and because we had highly variable results and stagnant student achievement, we needed to think a little bit more about some early tight coupling and deprivatizing the practice of teachers, identifying best practices, getting universal expectation of outcomes and methodologies, building collaboration, thinking about a systems approach. Next slide. And so, we built high degrees of interconnectedness. We broke down the isolation. We are struggling with the idea of adaptability. We want adaptability, but we want predictability. And so that's that continuum of how do I, as a leader, I need to pick my moments. It's not all one or the other. You need to choose the things that, we want tightly coupled, because we want to guarantee results, and we want to loosen up on things where we want adaptability. Go ahead and advance the slide, and I might have you go a couple slides. So here's the idea of a pendulum swing. This has happened both historically in education, but it's also might be something that happens to an individual leader, where you don't want to be random about it, but you want to be intentional about where you're applying it. And I'm going to give you an example of that. Go ahead, switch. So I worked with a researcher out of Harvard, Richard Elmore, for years. He passed away a couple of years ago, great loss to education. And he came to my school to work with my leaders one day, and he talked about a study that he had done back in the early 2000s using the original PISA schools in Northern Europe. The schools that took the PISA test and were working with the PISA Foundation and, on best practices in education. And this large scale study on teacher practice and student outcomes, he took away the following findings. He took away that best practices are identifiable and reproducible. So that's kind of a tight coupling idea. He took away that student achievement increases linearly as best practices for teachers increase. And so go to the next slide. And what he saw was when you graphed out teacher skills advancing across the bottom, the x-axis, and student achievement across the y-axis, that there is this point where when teachers gain enough skills, all of a sudden you get an exponential increase in student achievement. He called that skill set high basic. And in the loose tight coupling domain, what he and I talked about a lot was prior to high basic, you really needed your system to be more tightly coupled, where these are the fundamental best practices. These are the pedagogies that we believe and know through research work for kids. And you need to get every teacher to have those best practices and to implement those best practices. But there's going to come a point in time where they've mastered them, where you need to let the teacher go. And he called these people hunters. You need to let them go hunt, pioneers, scouts, whatever you want to call them. But he used hunters because he also had an accountability on it that said, at that point, when the teacher has all their skills and they've have, a history of good practice, you need to let them go, be creative, be adaptable, let them hunt, provided they continue to bring back results. And you need to take their best practices that they do in this loosely coupled zone and bring them back into the fold of the universal practices so that the whole system benefits. In the Harvard School of Educational Psychology, they talk about ambidextrous organizations, where every organization, high quality organization, needs to be ambidextrous. You need to have a solid base of incremental universal improvement that is probably pretty tightly coupled. But you also need these arms of innovation and creativity, the incubator moments that are really trying brand new things, and things that work are brought back into the fold. And so this is something that I've been working with my team on. How do we get intentional? And leadership intentionality for me is such a key part of effective leadership. And so I'm trying to get my leaders to be effective about being intentional about where they loose tight couple. What are they going to insist on high degree of accountability and a high degree of uniformity? And where are they going to allow people to cut loose and adapt and be creative and innovate? Right now in our system, we're functioning more a little bit on the tight end, but that's with an eye toward growing toward the loose end. My final analogy I use with all my leaders is that this is, for me, I love music. This is a lot like learning to play music. You start with notes and scales and a lot of structure. And when you get really good at it, you get to play jazz. However, really good jazz, if you pay attention to it, The scales and the structures are inside it. They're there. You can see them, you can hear them, you can feel them. And as a musician, you're playing those scales. You're just doing it in a highly interpretive and creative way. And that's, to me, what instruction in the classroom is like.
So Howard, I love that closing analogy. And I know that you have a few more slides that will be shared with people anyway as resources. But I think that high basic is such a key concept. And to the analogy of music, I'll give you the analogy of art, where there's Picasso sitting in a restaurant outside of Barcelona, and the waiter comes, and Picasso, and the waiter asks him, "Could you draw something for me?" So Picasso draws like a bull, but like 3 lines, okay? Gives it to gives it to the waiter, and he tells the waiter, "This will be worth a lot of money someday. Congratulations." And he's like, "But why?" And like this is so simple. He's like, "Well, this is 30 years of practice that brought me to the point that allows me to make it that synthetic." That essential in its way. So there's a lot to unpack in what you said, Howard, something along the lines of like making best practice common practice, or I'd love to refer all of our panelists and participants to the previous roundtable where Sean Lusher, who was the CEO of a school district, was talking a lot around efficiency preparedness within a system and within a strategic context system. How can you guide a people in a system? And he, being on a school district level, obviously has a very different perspective than when you are ahead of school, because you're just on a higher level of analysis. And I think, yeah, there's just so much to unpack that I would be sad not to give time for the other panelists right now. So I think I'll keep my comments, if that is all right, for the fireside chat afterwards. Same thing, Joe, with your question and your comment. We have a half an hour's time after the more formalistic recorded part called the fireside chat, where we can unpack more of these things with the panelists in a very informal way. So I think, George, unless you have anything that you wish to add, I think I'll let you just hand it over directly to John.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. What a pleasure it is to be here today, literally with a global audience. And thank you to Howard for setting up the conversation in such a fantastic way. I would say that the first thing I'd want to talk about on the first slide that you see is that loose, tight continuum is not the typical framework by which I view my leadership. As you progress to the next slide, and you'll see the quote there, I often focus on shared leadership as the key aspect of our roles. The job of a school leader is so complex. We are PR managers, we are human resource, we are facilities management, we are, of course, instructional leaders, and it's complex, all-consuming work. And I'm very passionate in my work about building systems that help to increase the collaboration and shared ownership across the community, in order to make sure that it is not one person who is in charge of this work, but it is, as Howard said, with a great deal of intentionality, many hands making for light work. So on the next slide, what I found is I thought about the loose, tight continuum. I found there are definitely parts of my professional practice that look more like the Kandinsky painting or that round football pitch that Howard talked about. And there are other times where you see the more intentional plots and structures that we saw in the first painting. So the loose aspects of my leadership comes through meaningful ongoing opportunities for collaboration, idea sharing, the sense that an idea could go in a different way depending upon the people who are in the room, and the collaborative sense of building the future together in a creative way. And I'll give you some practical examples of what that looks like. On the tight aspect of the continuum for my leadership, you'll see a great deal of intentionality in the systems and the strategies that I use, and you'll see a strong adherence to shared values and priorities. And when I say values and priorities, I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. Those, yes, they are my values and priorities, but they are also built consensus across the community to make sure that really following along with the compass point, our true north of Nipmuc Regional High School and our district. So the best way, I think, to take a look at it is to look at some specific examples of my leadership in action. The first one on the next slide that you'll probably notice is that I was introduced as a co-principal. It is not unique, but it is rare. I have not come across many other co-principals. I've been in my role at my school for 12 years as a principal. I've been here for 24 years in total. And I have the great privilege of saying that I am now working at a school where my dad taught for 46 years. So although I did not attend Nipmuc, My roots go pretty deep into the ground here, and I do see myself continuing through the entirety of my career at this school. What I'm passionate about, my why for leadership, is reimagining school, challenging many of the assumptions we make about school, and building a school that is more equitable, exciting, relevant, happy, meaningful, and suited for the modern world. That is challenging work. And so I've by no means been in this work alone. I, about 5 years ago, restructured my position to become a co-principal, knowing that I had an exceptionally talented assistant principal who was working with me. We are the only 2 members of our administrative team for a school of 600. I had someone who is bright, talented, math-oriented, and STEM-oriented, whereas I have more of the humanities mindset. And although she was comfortable in her role and lives in the community and had no designs on moving out of our school, I really saw an opportunity to restructure and build school leadership that will sustain for the long run in reimagining school. And I say long run, I mean the next 15 years that I have in my career. So let me tell you a little bit about what the co-principal is and how it fits in the model of loose-tight continuum. I would say the first thing is what it's not. It's not a 50-50 split of our responsibilities. It is a 100-100 mindset, meaning that we engage in all aspects of school leadership together, from the simplest management planning to the big picture planning to working directly with our constituents in our community. We made sure in our work, and you'll see that Christoph is going to drop it in coming up with this new model, we wanted to be really intentional about our job description. And so we took time to reimagine the job description of a principal and what it looks like for the modern age. I encourage you to check that out, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about the model or how we built it. And in redesigning our job description, we also built a lot of really intentional structures that help to support our work. So let's look at it in the continuum of loose and tight. From, and you can go ahead to the next slide if you'd like, George. From sort of the Kandinsky side of things, the jazz side of things, you would notice that our leadership, just in the nature of the title and the role, it includes being open to others' ideas. It includes being willing to allow someone else's ideas to turn into the direction that the school is going. It involves being comfortable with not being the primary decision maker for everything that happens in the school. That challenges a lot of assumptions we make about what a principal or a head of school's role is. And for many, I often get the question of what does it look like in practice? And I think this is where we shift more to the tight side of the continuum, tight leadership. And that we've built very intentional structures from the day-to-day things of having a shared email address. We now share an office that we call the collaboration space. When we address our community, we address each together from the same podium, 2 microphones. Our business card, one side is my information, the other side is her information. So some of it is making sure that the view and the way we present the role is equitable and demonstrates that it's shared. But we also have really detailed protocols for in-person and digital collaboration. We share to-do lists. All of our work is done collaboratively, and that could not have, the role of the co-principal could not happen unless we had that intentionality around the structure of how we manage the responsibilities of the job. The other place where we have a great deal of intentionality is around our values and our beliefs. The sharing of the head of school role, of the principal role, can't happen if you feel differently about the core aspects of our job and our leadership. And so we have spent a lot of time talking, sharing, presenting together, and working with our community to make sure that we know what our compass is, we know what our true north is, and I can show you a little bit more about how we've involved our community in that work as well. Another really concrete example of what the loose-tight continuum looks like in practice is how we have adjusted our leadership structure and the way we make decisions. On the next slide, you'll see the term lead learner workshops. Lead learner workshops for us at Nipmuc Regional are the evolution of department chair meetings. Department chair meetings were 3 hours a month with heads of English and math and science getting together, and we had 10 really talented people, but we were making decisions for the other 600, 700 people in our community. We asked ourselves, what if we reimagined the role and the structure of our leadership? We now hold monthly forums that are open to any teacher in the building and any student in the building. And so we regularly on a monthly basis have 20 students and 20 educators working together in an action-oriented way, building the future of our school collaboratively. The great example I have of this is when we first started these about 5 or 6 years ago, we had our most veteran teacher and a freshman who had been in school for 3 weeks. And when it came time for them to present their portion of the workshop, the freshman got up. The brand new student now had a voice that was as important as the person who had been there for 3 decades. So that's a really powerful example of what it looks like in action. Christoph, a moment ago, dropped into the chat our Lead Learner website. I encourage you to explore. There are 5 or 6 years of agendas, meetings, activities, and feedback from our community. We believe in transparency, and it'll give you a great taste of what our school is all about. We got there, as you see on the next slide, by collaboratively building our most important guiding document, and that is our definition of learning. When you get the slides, I encourage you to take a look at it. I wrote none of these words, and so when you talk about loose, tight continuum, it is jazz by handing over the leadership to a group of 20 teachers and 20 students and saying, what do you want to build in the future? But it is highly structured in that we know our compass and we return to the compass every time we work together. I encourage you to check out the who, what, where, when, why, and how of learning in Nipmuc Regional. It inspires me every single day. One more quick example of what it looks like in action for us as I move quickly through the slides, we'll go to our food for thought lunches. So in addition to sharing my role in sort of a loose kite continuum and sharing the leadership of the school with lead learner workshops, we also have ongoing food for thought lunches, which are forums where we get student student input on a variety of questions. We determine questions at the beginning of a school year, and usually there's about 8 questions that we keep consistent over the entirety of the year. We meet with our students, have lunch together, and then get into a feedback forum where they're writing information down on chart paper. We then collect it digitally and create word clouds that highlight some of the key takeaways from our students, whether it's what they love most about school, what they want teachers and administrators to know, their most powerful moment of learning. We capture the qualitative data from our community that's most meaningful and then do something with it. So again, this is the Kandinsky painting of me meeting with about 400 students a year to get their feedback on the same data points and then taking that information and doing something with it. So for instance, we heard from our students that homework and the hours they were spending on homework was a real challenge for them, which over the course of a year became the giant word in the word cloud, meaning it was repeated most often by our students. We decided to convene a group of students, parents, educators, and administrators. We put a homework committee together. We built collaboratively homework guidelines in order to create new norms about how we handle work at our school. So those are 3 quick examples of the co-principalship, lead learner workshops, and food for thought lunches. And again, as you come to that last side, you will see that it allows for many voices, many hands to be involved in the work, a lot of creativity. At the same time, it gets done because we have really tight structures, intentionally built strategies, and shared values and priorities that drive our work.
Wow. I mean, I come out of a 15-year co-governance model, which you call co-leadership, and I know how challenging it can be and how much you have to invest into the relationship for it to work. And that is like an investment which you have to remind yourself, which has a return on investment as opposed to a sunk cost. And I really love how it's kind of you've portrayed in my words like a coalition of the willing. With your co-principal, where you leave the ego at the door and you do it all with the school's best interests at stake, and that leaving the ego at the door. Also in leadership team, I've heard so consistently, it's not my idea, it's the idea. It's not my roadmap, it's the school's roadmap. All these things are super important, and you said it beautifully. And lastly, what really resonated with me also now, but also in our pre-conversation, was how you're using symbols of like the business card or the shared office. The shared office is huge. This is something I cannot only apply. I cannot just applaud you for. This is just amazing. And even the role of communication. I think we had one of our round tables around the importance of communication when it comes to strategy. And I think in a co-leadership model or in a co-principal model, using your words, it's even more important. So I've put all the links into the chat. Some of them you have to copy paste until I figured out how to transfer links into Zoom chat. Sorry about that. But look at this, because this is like real, pragmatic, day-to-day things that you can apply. For me, I would hate for anybody looking at these round tables to feel very enthused, and then comes Monday morning 8 o'clock and you get the big "so what" question. with everything I've heard. We have practical things right here that we've heard so far that I'm just really looking forward to see pop up in as many schools as possible. So George, I'm sorry, I've been doing a lot of the talking, and normally you're more vocal on your side.
No, it's okay. It's quite all right. I'm just really inspired by Howard and John and what they've shared with us, and just some of the practical ways that that they can implement loose type coupling in their districts and in their schools. So looking forward to hearing from Thomas next.
Okay, Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a privilege to talk to fellow educators and share ideas and thoughts about leadership in education. Needless to mention that I do not have all the answers either. Simple advice I don't have, or solutions. I will say things here, maybe as a counterpoint, that are provocative, easy to challenge, and very difficult to apply in our daily work life. Next slide, please. So loose versus tight leadership is the question of this talk today. And the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear it is, do we have a choice? As a school leader, do I really have the capability and the freedom to choose my leadership style or leadership framework freely? In my present job as a leadership search consultant, I have the very interesting privilege to read CVs of aspiring school leaders and sometimes to interview them personally or watch them perform in front of interview panels. The one obvious question that, whether it is asked or not, they always want to answer is, what is your leadership style? And it always brings a big smile to my face when I hear terms like transformational, distributed, affiliate, servant, democratic, strategic, and so on. Because I really wonder whether we can just pick and choose. Does Putin, Biden, Trump, Zelensky really have a choice as to what type of leader they are or what the leadership style they want to apply? I don't think so. My leadership mantra that I'm trying to accept, to live and promote in my teams, therefore, is this. What you see on the slide. In my view, there is a true leadership definition hysteria today. Feel good, dictatorship, Talmuds are taboo, and this has the consequence that you cannot longer cope well with negative aspects of your job. For example, anger, noise in the relationships, defeat, unresolved issues, or worse things. But in my view, you can deal better with misery if you accept that it exists. If you seek meaning in work, it is certainly the best way to establish and maintain a healthy relationship with yourself, your job, and the people you lead. Next slide. What nowadays is required from school leaders is enormous. Today's leaders have to make sure their students and teachers' academic, emotional, psychological, mental, spiritual, physical, nutritional, and social needs are met, while being careful not to overstimulate, understimulate, improperly medicate, or neglect them in a screen-managed, processed, food-free, negative energy-free, plastic-free, body-positive, socially conscious, but also a little bit firm environment, nurturing, fostering independence, gentle, but not overly permissive. And this does not even include the responsibility for state-of-the-art facilities, growing student numbers, achieving a balanced budget, or even some financial profit. Pass accreditation, and re-accreditation, get EdTech going. How do we do this? Loosely or tightly? Next slide, please. How to deal with this? Now, I think we cannot talk about leadership if we are not clear about our goals. What outcomes are we aiming for? What do we want our students to become? How do we want our staff and faculty to achieve this? What does this mean for our students, for our work, for our goals as people working in education? It's not just an organizational question, it's a very personal question. It's almost political. Do we want our students to become exam machines that score high in tests, change makers that shake the world, or just fulfilled individuals that lead a meaningful life? Next slide. The term school leader is connected to so many words, terms, expectations, and interpretations. People associate the role of a school leader with so many concepts, ideas, hopes, based on personal experiences, dreams, discussions, what they hear on the news, role models, good and bad. It's scary to see like that on just one page, and I'm sure you could all add even more examples and words. Next slide. Loose or tight, it doesn't matter. In my experience, there are 4 core aspects of school leadership that we have to take care of. First is content, so subjects, languages, exams, local culture, class sizes, additional offers like student support services, sports, extracurricular activities, etc. Second is keeping it tidy and smoothly running, timetabling, teaching, assignments, staffing, facilities, finances, HR, legal requirements. Third is your community work, internal and external PR, marketing. In certain jobs in my career, in certain countries, it included religious work or even mafia work. And the fourth is giving direction and judgment for the big picture of life, individually or for the whole organization. The leadership of every organization has the same 4 components to deal with. In my experience, it is sometimes easier in small schools and sometimes easier in big schools to keep these components together. So many professionals you have in big schools that help you. The role becomes more like, for example, the Pope in the Catholic Church, except for the fact that we would have a real problem with our child safeguarding standards, but that's another issue. Next slide, please. I think it just takes a big heart and not a big brain to bring together the 4 aspects of your job. And then the question of tight or loose leadership becomes more fluid. This doesn't make it any easier though. Next slide. The job feels like the role of a superhero, but let's not forget that every superhero has 1 or more sidekicks. You're not alone, and some of your sidekicks might step in when your leadership style does not match the situation or the urgent needs. Some of your sidekicks might just in time provide a bit more tightness or looseness. Let them help. Next slide. Schools are sometimes monsters. I call them friendly monsters, but still monsters. So my approach with monsters is don't try to tame them, right them. Be smart. Use swarm intelligence like the ants when they build their big nests, like schools of fish when they try to fend off shark attacks, or flocks of birds that fly south together to help each other. Next slide. So what to make of it all? Here are 4 principles you can base your leadership on. And if you're lucky, a natural leader's type, tight or loose, your leadership style evolves. Good leaders are value-based leaders, and they infuse the school with their values. They inspire their people and teams to act and make major transformation. Inspirational leadership is contagious. Most people want to be inspired, and when they are, you just need to get out of their way. They will do amazing things and will move forward the whole school. Next slide. Strength-based leadership. We have to move the school from individual to collective intelligence, from single experts to great insight of expert circles, from comfortable stability expectations to the structuring of instability, from functioning work systems to learning work systems. And to achieve this, tight or loose, I don't have the answer. Next slide. Mindset-based leadership. But I know for sure, if we are able to question and maybe to change the mindset of our organization, we will be more successful. It's an old statement, culture eats strategy for breakfast. From hierarchical to dynamic regulation systems, from process control to process moderation, excuse me, from instructing to persuading, from individual decision-making to participative problem-solving and co-responsible implementation. Let's question the mindset of our teamwork. Would it be possible to shift some of our paradigms to assumptions, habits, This is not a one-way street. The arrows go in both directions. It's not good on the left and bad on the right, but we might shift from one side to the other according to the different situations and requirements in order to better work as a team. Next slide. Individualized leadership, just like we are doing with students, providing different learning experiences for our students, we must do the same with teams, the teams that we lead. We have to be more aware of their personality and the individuality. And if we do so, we start to recognize their unique strengths and weaknesses, and we can distribute and adjust responsibilities, tasks, timelines, support, controls accordingly. Applying this strategy will allow us to build truly inclusive teams. Inclusive teams are very powerful when moving an organization forward or implement change. Next slide. Inclusive teams really understand the facts. They care deeply. They create legends. They show empathy, stay curious, ask open questions, and touch, don't move. Once they touch up on a problem, they do not reject it anymore and simply pass it on. They stay with it. Next slide, please. In the past, school principals have been seen as captains of a big, unwieldy ship steering through constant hurricanes. At my last school, my predecessor even gave me a captain's hat during the handover ceremony as a symbol for his leadership style. It was the time of heroic leadership, but we are now in post-heroic school leadership periods. I love to compare my school with music as well, with a symphonic orchestra. I see my role as the conductor of this orchestra. Each instrument, each group of instruments is extremely important to produce the sound and to interpret the music. We practice individually and in small groups, and sometimes the whole ensemble, and sometimes we invite soloists. And when we do well, we create a wonderful sound. In order to achieve this, tight or loose, I don't know. The conductor of the orchestra is the leader. And the best way to do this is to show humility, deal with conflicts, have courage to experiment, develop potential, do not concentrate on efficiency, view the people you lead as emancipated individuals, embrace complexity, acknowledge unpredictability and paradoxes, and do not emphasize linear tools and standardized competences. Thank you.
Wow. This was, so we've had music, art, and sports today, and I think, Thomas, you brought it together so beautifully. And I think I guess what came to mind, and this is maybe a little bit sharing my context, is that tomorrow I'm flying to Germany to teach a course at the university called Designing a Career with Purpose. And so these are master's students there in the marketing department. And the whole course is built around 3 axes. So there's the what, the how, and then the emotional baggage you need for the journey. And what you just said is that what piece, the what involves values, the what involves self-awareness, because with self-awareness, you get the awareness of others, and you get that situational feeling that you need to adjust the need to adjust the context. And that vulnerability that comes with feeling comfortable with uncertainty and not knowing it all. I personally very much resonated with the analogy of the conductor, because it is very, very true. You have to get everybody to sing together or to play together in a sense that you get the tune out of it. So I'm very, very, very grateful for all of the panelists having joined us today. This was great. I'd like to hand it over to George with a few last pieces, and then for all of you, you're welcome to stay on for another 30 minutes for just an open chat. Unfortunately, Joe had to leave us. He private messaged me that he had a meeting at 5 o'clock because he wanted to discuss a certain aspect afterwards. So I'll make sure that I'll send information to him separately. But you know what? The next part of this discussion is going to be very open-ended and very free-flowing. So stay on. George, please.
Thanks, Christoph. And again, thanks to our panelists. just really fascinating. It's something I've been interested in for a long time. I can remember as a young teacher and aspiring administrator, I was fortunate enough to attend a workshop that was done on leadership styles. And so much of what I heard today from all three of you really resonated with that workshop, and some of the things that I learned there, and some of the things that I tried to use during my career as a school administrator. But again, we'd like to thank the panelists, and we'd like to thank all of you who have joined us today. Just remember, we're going to continue this conversation with our opportunity to extend and to open it up to really be a conversation with everyone that's here today. We will also be continuing this conversation with Howard at the NEASC conference, which will take place in December. And we hope that some of you will be able to join us for that. It'll be in Boston on the 1st and 2nd of December. And in the spring, we will continue our roundtables. The next theme will be future-proofing schools, best practices from strategy and implementation. And that strategy roundtable will be held on January 26th. So we hope that you'll join us for that. And if you'd like to get the emails prompting you for that and connecting you with previous roundtables and the recordings of those, please make sure to fill out the form that was in the chat, and that will put you on the mailing list, and we'll be able to make sure that you get those. So again, on behalf of myself, Christoph, our panelists, we'd like to thank you again for joining us today, and we hope to see you soon. I will be stopping the recording now, and for those of you that are with us today live, we can continue the conversation in a more informal way. So again, thank you all. Have a great day.